All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've ever felt completely out of place in today's loud, hyper-fast, always-on society, well, you're going to want to pay close attention to the psychology we're unpacking today. We're looking at the independent mind and why it's highly evolved, not outdated. So why do the strongest minds often walk alone? Society loves to tell us that if you have a small circle of friends, or if you need a ton of alone time, well, you must be antisocial or maybe even a little broken. But today, we're going to completely flip that script. We're exploring how these exact traits are actually evolved psychological superpowers. You aren't falling behind at all. You might actually just be operating on a completely different, highly competent wavelength.
Section 1. Misunderstood Minds.
Moving right into Section 2, the 1970s Brain Evolution.
Think back to growing up in that classic 1970s era, or really any childhood defined by total unstructured freedom. That environment developed something called self-directed problem solving. Remember when your parents would just look at you and say, "Go find something to do, or I'll find something for you to do." You figured it out real quick, didn't you? By having to invent an entire day out of absolutely nothing, you learned how to generate your own purpose from total emptiness. It's an incredible skill that, honestly, modern childhoods often skip entirely. And that naturally brings us to adaptive risk calibration. You climbed trees that were way too high. You rode bikes down steep hills with no helmets. Every single scraped knee taught your nervous system the vital difference between actual, life-threatening danger and just manageable risk. You learned this by living it out in the real world, not by watching it happen safely on a screen.
Like the saying goes, we grew up on hose water. We were feral and it was glorious. Every scar you got felt like a Medal of Honor with a whole backstory. And the brilliant thing is, it built deep, lasting resilience, not trauma. This is exactly why today you can walk straight into a chaotic crisis and just start solving things while everyone else is running around panicking. Your baseline anxiety is so much lower because your threat assessment is just perfectly calibrated.
Section 3. The Power of Solitude.
Now, consider this concept, comfortable solitude capacity. You probably spent hours in your room as a kid exploring entirely alone, and you weren't lonely at all. There wasn't a glowing screen constantly demanding your attention. And here is the truly wild part. Recent psychological studies show that modern digitally addicted people would literally rather receive mild electric shocks than sit quietly in an empty room alone for 15 minutes. To you, that probably sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? You figured out early on that boredom simply isn't an emergency. Your brain never developed that frantic addiction to constant connectivity that completely defines modern life. And this is the exact reason why you can sit quietly in a waiting room or just exist in comfortable solitude without completely losing your mind to your phone. Next up, we have analog patience. Seriously, think about this for a second. You used to have to wait a whole week for your favorite TV show to air. There was no binge watching. You took a photo and literally had to wait days to see if someone's eyes were closed. This constant daily practice of delayed gratification fundamentally rewired your brain. Research actually shows that people who grew up waiting for things naturally possess much better impulse control, and that directly leads to better long-term relationships and massive career success. The whole instant gratification thing, it just doesn't satisfy you the way it does everyone else. So the real kicker from this era is what psychologists call unsupervised autonomy wiring. At 8 years old, you'd leave the house, and the only rule was, be back before the streetlights come on. Because you navigated creeks and woods miles away from home, entirely unmonitored, you developed an incredibly strong sense of internal motivation. It builds this high competence for making your own independent judgment calls, totally without needing a modern GPS or a micromanager holding your hand every step of the way. Which brings us to Section 4, the myth of no friends.
Listen, having a small circle does not mean you're broken. You simply have zero tolerance for fake people. You crave deep, real psychological connections over surface-level, hey, how's the weather small talk. As your self-awareness goes up, your tolerance for manipulative or gossipy behavior just drops to absolute zero. You would honestly rather be entirely alone than sit through a conversation with someone who is performing instead of being authentic.
And there's actually a biological reason for this. It's called high social sensitivity. While extroverts gain all this energy from big crowds, your highly analytical brain is processing information so much more deeply. You're picking up on hidden motives, body language, multiple layers of interaction, which means you naturally require much longer recovery periods of complete solitude after socializing just to recharge that drained battery.
Section 5. Protecting your inner peace.
This naturally leads right into low social dependency. You don't rely on a massive crowd of acquaintances just to feel good about yourself. You can entertain yourself, you can solve complex problems alone, and you find deep comfort within your own mind without needing constant external validation. Now, to an outsider, this might mistakenly look like you're being distant or cold, but actually, it's a massive indicator of profound psychological strength. You also possess what's known as a high trust threshold. People with few friends often have past experiences, maybe a rough betrayal or just spending time around the wrong crowd that taught them to be cautious. Psychology shows us that once trust is broken, the brain intelligently becomes highly protective. You don't just let anyone into your personal space anymore. You observe longer. You test people before granting them access to your hard-earned peace.
So let's pull all of this together into a complete profile. Here are the 5 key traits of the highly selective independent mind. 0 tolerance for fake people. A deep preference for quality over quantity. High social sensitivity that requires recovery time. Low social dependency for validation. And a highly protective trust threshold. These powerful traits absolutely validate why your mind simply works differently, brilliantly prioritizing profound self-awareness over just collecting a bunch of shallow acquaintances.
Section 6. Capability, not coldness.
What today's hyper-connected world lazily writes off as being antisocial or outdated is actually something vastly different. That independence that looks like coldness, it's actually deep competence. That comfort with absolute silence, that's depth. And your ability to wait for things is a fierce, ironclad discipline. The honest truth here is that you are carrying forward rare capabilities that are practically going extinct right now. You survived an era of true feral freedom. You built a protective inner peace and a razor-sharp intuition that modern society so desperately lacks. All that unsupervised time, all those scraped knees, all those quiet, boring afternoons, they didn't damage you. They built you into someone who is highly self-reliant. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Are you ready to stop apologizing for how your beautifully independent mind naturally protects its peace? Think about how these forgotten superpowers serve you today. Instead of feeling out of place, ask yourself, how can you lean into these incredible strengths even more? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep protecting your peace.